every once in a while I'll find something new out about American, U.S. military history, and it'll fascinate me for months at a time, and it's all I'll read about. It's all I want to watch YouTube videos on. I mean, I go deep.
Yeah, I mean, at this
When
age, it's like, how did I not know about that?
Right.
Just jump in.
And just being the history enthusiast that I am, dude, I like to get down in the weeds with something new when I'm learning it, man. I want to know everything there is to know about it as quickly as possible, and that's because honestly, most of the time, the things that I'm interested in, it's the people that are doing, the job that fascinate me, because the job is just so crazy, or the mission is just so extreme. Well, as far as extreme and crazy goes, I mean, this is probably one of the most savage units the U.S. military has ever come up with. From the guys that made it up to the mission set they were given, it's top to bottom intense and chaos and insanity. It's just crazy to me. We're going to be talking today about the Military Advisory Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. MACV-SOG for short.
Sweet.
And this unit was active during the Vietnam War, but they're unique compared to all other U.S. Units, U.S. military units during the war, because these guys' sole focus was cross-border operations in Laos and Cambodia, pretty much the entire war. So from 65 to 71. These guys are conducting missions deep behind enemy lines, focused primarily around the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and they're doing it all in a very, black ops, top secret kind of setting. So meaning that, like James Bond, if he was captured or caught on a mission, the British government would have the right to disavow any knowledge of his being there. That's what these guys are dealing with, but in real life, right? So if any Americans get caught, by the NVA operating in Laos or Cambodia, the U.S. is going to disavow any knowledge of them being there. They're on their own.
Yep. Sounds like a one-way ticket.
Just crazy to me.
It's risky,
crazy to me.
Risky.
They're operating under that stress factor, and then they're operating so far away from friendly forces that a lot of the time, assets that you and I would have in combat, or a normal unit in Vietnam would have, these guys just don't have access to. They're so deep behind enemy lines.
Wild.
So to kind of get us kicked off here, there's multiple facets to MACV-SOG. It's not just the operators themselves. You have guys that are working on PSYOPs. You have guys that are working on, airstrike campaigns, bombing campaigns, B-52s. You have a naval activities group in MACV-SOG. So there's all kind of branches of MACV-SOG, but specifically we're going to be focusing on what falls under the classification of Ops 35. Ops 35 is the ground force element that focused on cross-border missions. So that's who we're going to be zeroing in on.
All right.
And specifically within that organization, we're going to be looking at their recon teams. Now, there are a few other different types of teams, hatchet teams or hatchet forces. There's Mike forces as well, which we'll get into in other episodes. But today I want to highlight the recon teams, because the recon teams really, that's the one that really, they blow my mind a little bit, man. And to explain why it's so fascinating to me is these recon teams are small, right? It's not a big team. You're not taking a platoon or a company with you. The teams are going to be made up of between 6 to 12 guys total, right? But each team will only have at most 3 Americans. The rest will be indigenous forces, and that'll either be Nungs or Montagnards, who are both, indigenous tribal people from South Vietnam and in that area, in Southeast Asia.
We had to have 7 with us, right? 7 like Americans.
A&A or
I mean, out of the OPs, we usually ran like 4 A&A with us, and then there'd be like 12 or 13.
I think it depended
Marines.
on what you were doing, but it's safe to say, dude, like from what I remember, most times when I was leaving the wire, when we were patrolling in the Charlie Echo section in Marja and doing all that stuff, at the minimum, we'd be going out with 12 dudes at the minimum, and that would be a shore patrol, right?
Yeah.
On average, you'd have 15, 16, maybe 20 guys, and that would be broken into 2 elements. So you have like this bounding overwatch, essentially.
Right. These guys are going to roll with 3, possibly.
Keep in mind, we're close enough to the fob usually. I mean,
Yeah.
within a few clicks that
Yeah.
they can get there quick if they need to, right? We're not going miles and miles behind enemy lines. You know, it's just crazy. So the teams are made up of, like I had mentioned, 3 U.S. Force, or 3 U.S. personnel, and the rest would be, you know, in what they called their indige forces, and they're basically mercenaries. They're paid fighters.
Yeah.
This gets into some of the cultural aspects of Vietnam at the time, but Nungs and Montagnards weren't looked on very favorably by Vietnamese, both North and South, and they wouldn't even be recruited for the South Vietnamese army, right? So the Vietnamese people, they looked at them in a very negative light, right? They weren't fans of Montagnards and Nungs, but according to, you know, pretty much every account that I can find, they're incredible fighters and probably the most savvy jungle navigators in the AO, right? These guys, you hear stories about these guys operating in the darkness of a triple canopy jungle at midnight, right? Like you're not going to see your hand in front of your face. It's pitch black, and these guys just having night vision, you know, like they can see everything.
So South Vietnamese made a bad choice there.
Right.
And we picked them up.
We picked them up, so good for us.
Cool.
But that being said, the 3 Americans on each team would usually be Green Berets. Now, SOG also had Navy SEALs. They had Recon Marines. They had Air Force PJs as well. So you have all branches contributing to these teams. But for the most part, at this time in America's military history, these teams are going to be made up of Green Berets. And they have very specific roles. Each American on the team has a very specific role. So you have what becomes like the code name for these positions. They use a numerical system. So you have the 1-0, which is the team leader, right? He's in charge of the whole op.
Yep.
You have the 1-1, which is the assistant team leader. He usually picks up Tail End Charlie, right? And he manages one end of the fight, while the team leader manages the other end, and the radio and all that good stuff if they get into contact. And then you have your 1-2. He's usually toting the radio, so the RTO, or he could also double as the medic as well. But they all have very specific roles, and it was all built around seniority, right? So it's seniority with experience, not seniority with rank. So you could have a staff sergeant being the 1-0 and a captain be the 1-1 because the captain's brand new to a recon team.
Experience matters.
It does.
Certainly.
It does really matter. Now, the really cool thing about these teams, which kind of ties into the subject matter we're covering for this season, is it's the only time since the Civil War that a troop commander has had to recruit, train, and then employ those troops in combat.
That's unique.
Yeah, right? So you have
That's
the volunteer units in the Civil War that do that, and then you have these recon teams, these SOG Recon Teams as well. A 1-0 would have to go out to a Montagnard or a Nung village, recruit fighters, recruit his indige fighters, take them back to the base, train them up, get them ready to go, and some serious training too, because they're going to be operating in very, very serious circumstances, which we'll get into here in a second. But get them trained up, and when he thought they were ready to go, he'd get them out on a recon
There's
patrol.
got to be a great level of trust when it comes to finding these people and recruiting
Well,
them
you
like
also
that.
have to be, I mean, this ties into the Green Beret aspect, but you have to be a good teacher too, right? I mean, that's one of the core,
naturally.
that's one of the core mission sets of a Green Beret, is to train, local foreign fighters, or I'm sorry, local national fighters, and then employ them in combat. And that's what these guys were doing, man. They would go out, recruit their team, train them up, and then send them out. Now, they do have quite a few different mission sets. Obviously, being a recon team, reconnaissance is one of those missions. And like I mentioned earlier, this is all centered around the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So a lot of it would be just observing troop movements and figuring out, are they trying to bulk up forces here in this region so they can launch an attack here? Are they trying to move troops further south through Cambodia and then hit like the Mekong Delta? But on top of that, they have many other missions that they get assigned as well. They have search and rescue missions, direct action raids. They get tasked with capturing enemy troops often to gather even more intelligence. They also get tasked with intercepting enemy comms, so they have to wiretap these landlines that run along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Just crazy stuff, dude. I mean, all kind of stuff. Now, one thing that is kind of cool is a BDA. You and I have done BDAs numerous times, and for us, that means a battle damage assessment.
Yep.
So when you're in country and you get into a TIC, troops in contact, you get engaged with the enemy. Higher ups are going to want you to go figure out what it is that you just put down, right? They want to know what destruction you just caused and how many enemy you took out and
push through
it and all that stuff. So eventually, you have to maneuver up to, where the enemy position was and look at everything, right, and bring back a report on it. Especially if there's any kind of ordnance dropped, right? If you have close air support or artillery, you definitely doing a BDA. Well, the first time a BDA is ever used by the U.S. military is in Vietnam, and it's a task assigned to recon teams inside of SOG.
Very cool.
For them, it's a bomb damage assessment, though. So again, this all ties back into the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but there's these huge bombing campaigns, B-52 bombing campaigns that are being conducted in Laos and Cambodia, targeting the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Well, the Air Force higher-ups wanted to know how effective these bombing runs were. Are we successful? Like, are we killing the guys we think we're killing? Are we ceasing operations here and causing any kind of problem whatsoever? So that's another mission these guys would have to do too. The first BDAs ever in U.S. military history were conducted by SOG guys. So yeah, it's pretty cool.